welcome. We are so excited about today's episode as we dive into addressing the top social media fads that we hate. Like, just to say it bluntly,
Just throw it out there.
we're just going to start really where we are. Um, really, because we just see a couple of these trends missing the big picture, and we want to share our perspective on a couple of these trends. Um, really calling out kind of anti-nutrients, cycle syncing, greens powders, and some really wonderful fat loss supplements that I'm sure you understand where our perspectives are coming from, but really to give the bigger picture. And we're probably going to, keep us posted if there are other topics you want us to address in this social media world, because this is just a sampling of the ones that have come to our attention in recent weeks. So, our first topic, anti-nutrients. So, there's lots of talk on social media about anti-nutrients. I'm using quotations when I say that, or more formally, these compounds are oxalates, lectins, and phytates. And in the social media world of Instagram and TikTok, these compounds are getting a lot of attention. But most accounts I see talking about them aren't sharing the full story. They're mostly creating fear about how anti-nutrients are damaging to your health, but very little education about what they actually are and the big picture of their role as part of plant foods and their overall impact on our health as a whole. So, what are anti-nutrients? Anti-nutrients are compounds that are found in plant foods, most often found in legumes, beans, nuts, grains, and leafy greens that function to protect the plant as part of its natural immune system. So, broadly speaking, these compounds, when ingested, do make it harder for our bodies to break down and access some of the minerals and nutrients from these plant foods. But in many ways, the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. So, let's discuss. So, I'm going to isolate kind of each one of these and talk specifically to the compound. So, oxalates, this is kind of the first anti nutrient. And I've heard a lot of fuss and I've gotten a lot of questions. I'm sure maybe Jilly has too. Um, and they get attention in their role in reducing the absorption of calcium from the foods that we eat. So, oxalates bind calcium in the digestive tract, but they don't bind all of it. They've also gotten a lot of attention around their role in calcium oxalate kidney stones. However, just because oxalates play a role in these dynamics does not mean they should be feared and avoided at all costs. So, a little bit of background, oxalates are found in some of our most nutrient dense foods: leafy greens like spinach, kale, and Swiss chard, berries, root vegetables, nuts, dark chocolate, and a varieties of grains such as buckwheat and amaranth. So, that's a pretty hefty list of like, oh, those are some nutrient dense foods there. Like, are those, actually killing us, is what social media and
Are they
TikTok kind of,
poison?
yeah, exactly. They're really talking about them as poison. So let's talk about the big picture and what's often missed in these conversations. So, in order to avoid or to absorb oxalates into the bloodstream where they, potentially are causing issues like kidney stones, they must be soluble. So, meaning water soluble or easy to absorb. And research shows that there's actually very low soluble oxalate concentrations in many of the problematic, quote unquote, foods that we're highlighting. So they're really not being absorbed into the body. They might be present, but are they being absorbed? And really, research is showing that they're being absorbed in very low quantities into the bloodstream from the diet. So the amount in food is not the direct relation to the amount that we're actually absorbing. So that's a big highlight right there, where, when we look at the research just black and white and not within context, we're kind of missing a big piece there. Another big piece with oxalates is higher mineral intake in our diets actually reduce the amount of oxalates absorption. So they stay in the gut and they get disposed of into the toilet, which is what we ideally want for those compounds. This is another reason why Jilly and I speak so much about the importance of minerals in our diet. So we're going to think about seafood and animal proteins and high quality dairy, even organ meats, bone broth. All of these will help to reduce that oxalate absorption. When we also think about these role in oxalates, we can even see vitamin deficiencies like B6 actually reducing the role of B6 actually reduces oxalate production in the body. So making sure that we don't have nutrient deficiencies and supporting our intake of B vitamins from varieties of food. So we can see other reasons at play that maybe oxalates are causing a stir if they are in anyone's health. Also, the health of the microbiome. So, our beneficial bacteria in the GI tract actually help to degrade oxalates in the gut. So having a diverse and abundant amount of beneficial bacteria, such as our lactobacillus and our bifidobacterium, help to balance out oxalate load. So that is, everything that we talk about of kind of nourishing the GI tract and nourishing the microbial populations. And the biggest nourishment to those are really our fiber-based foods, many of which we're kind of highlighting as, some of these oxalate foods. So we can see that there's actually benefits to many of these foods that are actually helping to degrade their own oxalate production or their own the potential for oxalate absorption in the body. And intake of healthy omega-3 fatty acids from the diet helps to reduce problems of oxalate. So that's that healthy, the kind of balanced plate, the gut and hormone healing plate that we've been speaking to that has healthy fat right on the plate. And then overall being well hydrated and having ample mineral intake for hydration helps to clear oxalates from the kidneys so we can avoid any burden such as kidney stones. So just kind of generally, really losing the forest for the trees is kind of what we're trying to bring attention to of all of the ways when we eat kind of a diversified and balanced nutrient intake of foods, we're actually helping to reduce the absorption and burden of oxalates on the body. And then last one really specific to oxalates here that, oxalates are compounds that can be introduced from the body in kind of three different sources. So we can have the diet. This is the one that we really just were talking about and where most attention is. But we also can have fungal burden on the body. Notably, candida overgrowth might be more familiar for most of us to think about. And Jillian and I can often see elevated oxalate levels when there's fungal burden, particularly again from that candida overgrowth or mold exposure. So this is a situation where we're blaming food for an issue that's actually not related to food at all. And the root cause solution would be to clear the fungal overgrowth and understand why it's there in the first place. So big picture, when we're kind of thinking about these things, really thinking of root cause of why are these here. And then some of the things that we can do is kind of rotating the variety of fruits and vegetables we're consuming. So we get a wider variety of nutrient intake, but also changing up the myriad of compounds that we consume along with those nutrients. But in our opinion, the benefits of these nutrients, again, and these foods outweigh the potential kind of oxalate burden. So there's two others that we kind of wanted to highlight quickly. This is phytate or phytic acids, another compound that's often criticized for its role, again, in binding minerals in the diet. This is calcium, iron, zinc. And these foods, these kind of compounds, these phytic acid compounds can be found in whole grains, legumes, seeds, and nuts. So, however, on the other side, phytate has been shown to have natural antioxidant function, and it's shown to have protective roles in the health, such as reducing blood cholesterol levels, prevention of kidney stones, protecting of neurodegenerative conditions, protection against fatty liver, osteoporosis, calcification in the cardiovascular system, and even in animal studies has shown to increase short chain fatty acid production, which we love, major anti-inflammatory roles in the gut, and even reduce pro-inflammatory cytokine production when we see rats fed high-fat diets. So again, there might be some slight mineral binding going on, but it does not outweigh the laundry list of benefits that we're seeing for these incredibly important foods. And then the last one that we want to touch on, because we feel like we couldn't just highlight one of them, we needed to call them all out, are lectins. And lectins are proposed to cause lots of things. So we have here inflammation, intestinal permeability, and an increased risk of food allergy and intolerance. This, again, isn't the whole story on lectins. So lectins are largely found in legumes like beans, lentils, chickpeas, soybeans, peanuts, and grains like wheat. And I think the biggest challenge with lectins is really looking again at the quality of research that's done on them. So many of these studies are not actually portraying lectins by human consumption, meaning the studies being conducted are using animals or cell cultures, and they're looking at isolated lectins rather than considering the larger context of lectins as part of a person's whole diet. So we're looking very much under a kind of microscope in the lab versus how are they interacting in the human body, in the digestive tract, and in the way that they're actually eaten. So the studies also look at the roles these compounds play when they're eaten in raw form. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never eaten a raw chickpea, a raw lentil, or a raw black bean. Like, good luck to you if that's the way that you're eating those. We don't recommend that.
Highly, highly do not recommend. Oh my
Like,
gosh.
but that's the way these studies are looking at them. They're looking at them in these raw forms. So we can just see again that we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. These compounds do play some roles in um, that protection for the plant and a little bit of causing. We can see some like mild inflammation or things like that from these, but again, they're providing so much more of an abundance of nutrients. So what we will say to lectins that if someone is struggling with digestive symptoms such as pain, bloating, or significant gas after meals, we certainly can be curious about the role that these foods are playing, but often it's not a root cause itself. So it more that these foods could be highlighting some dysfunction in the gut due to maybe an imbalance in the gut microbiome, a greater need for gut barrier support, or maybe general inflammation coming from some other deep root cause that does need attention. So these foods are, again, more bringing attention to that deeper root cause. They are rarely, if ever, the actual root cause themselves. And again, Jillian and I speak to these topics having practiced really helping people heal their guts and hormones for the past 15 years. So if these were a root cause that we were seeing commonly, we would tell you and we would validate it, but we're not. But having information and being able to understand the greater picture is really really helpful because fear is certainly not helpful. So what can we do if we notice some challenges with these foods? Or maybe if we just want to utilize best practices for enjoying these foods without worrying what we're seeing on social media. So, just a couple points here variety and rotation. Again, foundation of nutrition is variety. And that's really in all ingredients and kind of big picture to overall like health and nutrition practices. So, an idea would be we see this often in like green smoothies of someone having like spinach and kale every day in their smoothie. It's like, let's rotate those up. And, for your veggie that's in your smoothie, think about like cucumber or zucchini or frozen cauliflower or romaine or summer squash, or that list could go on, but make rotations every week. And, whatever you buy in the grocery store for that haul for that week, buy something different the next week, rotate it up. Practicing traditional cooking methods for beans and legumes in particular that naturally reduce these compounds. So that's soaking, sprouting, pressure cooking, fermenting, emphasizing mineral rich foods in the diet to help increase the availability of minerals in all meals and the absorption of those minerals from a variety of foundations. We don't just get minerals from legumes and nuts and seeds. They happen to have those compounds, but that's not the only resource that we can get them from in our diet. This is also where, drinking your minerals, which we speak to a lot, can be really helpful. That was a long-winded answer on why we're getting onto that. Do you have any things to add to kind of that anti-nutrient conversation?
So one thing I just wanted to kind of go back to is when you were talking about some of the research on lectins and how research is translating or not translating rather to real life. And I think it's just important to highlight that this is a really big thing across the board with nutrition science. Nutrition is a tough science. Food is hard to study in terms of the impacts of these things on the human body and human health, because when you are studying really specific nutrients and food compounds, when this research is starting out, we are often early on doing these tests or doing these research studies in animal models and things like that. And these studies are using isolated compounds in ultra high doses and creating these unique environments where they're able to look at things in isolation. And it's important to go through this process as you're studying different things, but it does not translate perfectly in terms of what the response is going to be in humans. And we have to think about how humans consume these foods normally. And it really is a problem across the board because on social media in particular, we see all this like cherry picking of, studies, singular studies that, are done in really, really small, sample sizes or, cell studies, animal studies like Abby mentioned. And you get this big headline that's super fear mongering, like X food causes, X, Y, and Z to happen. And then when you actually tease things apart, you see that, okay, the way that this nutrient was studied is never a way, never how an actual human would consume this in their diet. Like it would be very challenging to consume that amount of, lectins or whatever it is. So we always just need to kind of look at the whole picture and remember that as humans, we do not consume foods or nutrients or specific food compounds in isolation. We are eating a variety of these things. And if you see things online, on social media, on TikTok, where there's this big, study headline or, something is really extremist and fear mongering in the message or the position that, the post is taking, that should be an immediate red flag because nutrition is nuanced and there's always more to the story and more to the conversation when we're talking about these things.
100%. Especially when that headline is like targeting a like real whole food nutrient. Like it's like, okay, maybe when we see Skittles being like thrown up there as having like titanium dioxide in it, you're like, maybe I shouldn't eat Skittles every day. Like, that's kind of a concerning headline. But when it's like, because you, no matter what sect you're looking at in terms of like what dietary practice someone is following, like we could throw all foods under the bus for having some sort of compound in them that we don't want crazy high amounts of every single day. Like it exists in all foods. There's always there's education to our immune system. That's why food is information. Even like mushrooms, I mean, I like to think about mushrooms are we love mushrooms now. They're like getting the headlines all over the place, but it's like they are in fact really beneficial for our health because they keep our immune system on its toes. Our immune system's like, is this a pathogen? Oh no, it's a mushroom. Okay. Whew. Like, but it's like a little exercise for our immune system to be responsive, but not over responsive or under responsive. So that's also the role of food and the gut's role. So it's really fundamental to, where is the health of our gut? Where are the health of our hormones? Where's the health of our immune system? And then the foods that we eat. But in particular, to Jilly's point, like, if we're getting a headline about a real whole food that's like scaring living daylights out of us, like have that little light bulb go off of saying, I wonder if this isn't the whole picture. And, there might be some truth, as there usually is, to all of those pieces. But kind of, are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of never again eating that food? And are there actually, ways that we can approach it or bigger picture things that we can welcome in to just not have so much darn stress in our life?
Yeah, seriously, which is, going to be more harmful than anything, like we've said at the end of the day. And like Abby said as well, if there was something out there that we felt strongly you should avoid because it was detrimental to your health, we would be on our mics shouting it from the rooftops and letting you know because, we are here to provide you with the information, the tools that you need to support your health, to heal your gut, your hormones. So we are very passionate about this work, clearly. So if you hear both of us saying, hey, let's pause, use a little common sense, make sure we understand all the nuance here, then, I think you're in a safe space with all of these anti-nutrients. So let's dive into our next social media trend that makes our blood boil, which is cycle syncing. Cycle syncing is something that's become a huge TikTok, Instagram trend in recent months, or at least that's where I've started to see it kind of, circulating a little bit more. And for those of you that are not familiar with the term cycle syncing basically involves making supportive diet and lifestyle choices and adjustments based on the different hormonal fluctuations happening throughout your menstrual cycle, with the goal of optimizing hormone balance. On these social media platforms, the messaging out there from all the influencers is that cycle syncing is a tool for weight loss. And cycle syncing is also being talked about, or really there's being exaggerated claims made that cycle syncing can heal all sorts of symptoms. But specifically, I've seen a lot of the cycle syncing messaging around weight loss. The first problem here is that cycle syncing is now being talked about and treated like a diet. And you all know how Abby and I feel about diets. The second problem is that many of the recommendations we're seeing are so micro focused, so micro specific, that not only are they not supported by research, but they ultimately lead women to kind of missing the forest for the trees. And really kind of leave women or lead women rather to focusing on things that are not actually going to move the needle with their health. And really, it's probably just going to create a lot of stress at the end of the day. So, as a specific example, we've seen some TikTok videos recommending that women actually change the types of lettuce that they eat like 4 different times throughout the menstrual cycle, that they shift the types of grains that they're eating depending on where they're at in their menstrual cycle. So getting really, really zoomed in on, eat this specific food, this specific nutrient at this exact time in your cycle. This is also kind of similar to the seed cycling fad that's been around for a bit longer. And what I've kind of found is that once an influencer shares information like this, there's kind of this massive snowball effect with lots of copycats, like resharing, perpetuating the same not so great, not so supportive information. And it blows up and becomes this like whole thing. And the idea with these recommendations that we're seeing around cycle syncing is that by prioritizing these, specific foods and nutrients at certain times in your cycle, you're going to balance your hormones by optimizing, the right nutrients at that specific time. So we go through all sorts of hormone fluctuations, throughout the menstrual cycle. And while the body does actually mobilize different nutrients across different phases of the menstrual cycle, this does not mean that making ultra specific micro shifts with food at that moment in time is going to balance your hormones or lead to any of the results that are being talked about on social media. Our bodies are super, super intelligent and pretty tightly regulates our nutrient stores, our nutrient balance. And in order to actually build up nutrient stores and to optimize nutrient stores, generally, this is going to necessitate prioritizing nutrients from food really consistently over longer periods of time, longer time frame. So these like micro shifts day to day or week to week really don't support how we know the body works on a physiological level. And these micro shifts like, changing the types of lettuce, changing the grains, highlighting those specific nutrients, like I said, will probably create a lot more stress at the end of the day, which is pretty much, at the very top of the list in terms of things that are harmful for hormones, for metabolic health, for gut health. So a better, more effective approach would be really to eat a variety of greens consistently throughout the entire month. To eat a variety of great quality whole grains and to diversify week to week throughout the month. Same thing with seeds and seed cycling. We have no data to support those micro shifts. However, incorporating the flaxseed, the sunflower seeds, the pumpkin seeds consistently and getting a good variety over time is going to help you to build up your body's nutrient stores that can support really healthy shifts with hormones and, healthy hormone balance. I will say too, most women that we work with typically have some pretty significant gaps in their foundation. And this is not to pick on women. I know everyone is out there trying to do the best that they can, but clearly we live in a very confusing world when it comes to nutrition. And this is what we see often leading to big holes and gaps in that supportive nutrition foundation. And when I say, the foundation, we are seeing women that are not eating enough calories on a basic level. They're not eating enough protein. They're not getting enough fiber. So as you can imagine, if we are not meeting the body's fundamental energy, protein, fiber needs, micro shifts with lettuce is probably not going to lead to any significant, meaningful, change with your health. So just important to remember that we do need to build that supportive foundation first and foremost. Make sure that we're meeting the body's needs optimally before getting focused on like the nitty gritty with shifting foods and diversity and all of that, kind of good stuff. So that being said, there are definitely adjustments that you can make and things that you can prioritize to support hormonal shifts throughout the cycle. And ideally, with doing these things over time, so it's not going to be, an immediate change, but making shifts consistently over time, over the course of several months, this can lead to improvements with things like mood, energy, digestion, decreased PMS symptoms. As you kind of get deeper into doing these things more consistently. But we want to be careful that we don't miss the forest for the trees and we don't get too zoomed in, especially if we are not kind of supporting those fundamentals to begin with. And something that I just have to mention too is that, in our modern society, women are not educated about their bodies. We talk about this all the time, but they're really, really not educated about their bodies, their menstrual cycle, what's happening with their hormones throughout the cycle. And on a basic level, just understanding these fluctuations, what's happening in your body, what hormones are, doing at that time, can really, really give women a lot of information to be able to make more like intuitive shifts based off where they're at and what's happening, so they can feel a little bit more balanced throughout the month. So, just wanted to point that out as well. And Abby and I are going to do a deep dive episode at some point on the menstrual cycle. So we don't, kind of get too into the weeds today, but we will educate you on the menstrual cycle, what's important to know so you can kind of really tap into that, innate wisdom. And we'll get into the nitty gritty with supportive shifts with your diet and lifestyle that you can make to support your hormones over time. And in terms of not getting too into the weeds, we won't get into nitty gritty foods, but we did want to kind of point out a couple things that you could focus on or just think about in an immediate sense, even if you're kind of still working on the fundamentals, or maybe if you're really zoomed in on some of these micro shifts being suggested and you can kind of pull yourself back out a little bit. So, couple big things, and I think women are always surprised to hear this, but in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, so the luteal phase being about the 2 weeks before you get your period. So it's the time period after ovulation and before you get your period bleed. The luteal phase is the period of time in the menstrual cycle where most women, if they are going to be symptomatic, often experience symptoms during that time. They can totally experience symptoms at other points in the cycle, but the luteal phase tends to be where we see a lot of these symptoms pop up. So a couple things to point out here. In the luteal phase, across the board, no matter who you are, your cell's sensitivity to insulin decreases, meaning you are more prone to swings with blood sugar, big highs with blood sugar, big blood sugar crashes. And you all know very, very well how much blood sugar impacts how we feel in an immediate sense and how it impacts our gut and hormones. So during the luteal phase, that is definitely a time where we encourage our clients and we encourage women to really focus on that blood sugar stability and to maybe, hone in on that adequate protein intake and that consistent meal timing so we don't, amplify disruptions that can lead to more symptoms in that, 2-week period before you get your actual period. Something else that's really interesting is that we do have increased energy needs in the luteal phase. So our body actually burns more energy at rest, up to about 10% in terms of, what our caloric needs increase by. So if you're hungrier in the luteal phase, that would be a great time to respond to that, to kind of tap into, those signals that your body is giving you and to support it with more nourishment if you're getting cues that, your body needs more fuel. So just to kind of give you some big picture things that would be a much more valuable use of your time and energy to focus on, to make sure that you're emphasizing blood sugar stability in the 2 weeks before your period, that you're definitely, eating enough and supporting the body with stability there. And even those types of things can make a huge difference. But again, Abby and I will kind of walk you through the menstrual cycle and all of the foundational things and some of the micro things that you can explore. Anything else that you wanted to add, Abby, to the cycle syncing conversation?
Yeah, I think kind of what we were saying, we were chatting before this and just the idea of like those foundations being the big rocks. It's like if we don't have the big rocks in place, like don't chase the seeds, don't chase the lettuces, don't chase,
Mhm.
those other things that are really being touted as like the solution. It's like if you do this, then you will get relief from XYZ. When in reality, it's like, I think there's a lot of emphasis now on like living in alignment with your cycle, which is, amazing. And like the foundation of it too, of like understanding our cycle, what you said, I think is like
Mhm.
so important for all of us. But really, like, you don't have to change how you're eating throughout the month if you're really hugging those foundations. Like, if you want to, in addition to those foundations, start to bring in some seed cycling or start to do, certainly different movements can be helpful, or, some of these additional practices to kind of lean into some of these more like nuanced conversations of the cycle, like those can be wonderful practices. But again, it's like if you're just starting out and you're like, man, like I'm jumping from lettuce to lettuce and seed to seed, and I don't really know the why, and I haven't even thought about, the blood sugar and protein and optimal caloric intake and things like that. It's like put the seeds and the lettuces aside and really just focus on those foundations, and maybe don't make changes to them. Just make sure that it's like each day we're choosing to nourish, the body that we're in, get ample amount of protein, calories, like all of those things, because we don't those are consistent, and those needs. And then listening to our appetite is another, helpful piece. Some of us might need to back into that one though, because if we have been maybe undernourishing, or really practicing like extended fasting or things like that, sometimes we can have dysregulations to our appetite, so we need to use outer wisdom to educate the inner wisdom.
Mhm.
We've talked a lot about that, but I think that's kind of the big picture things, and Jilly said it like so well. Um, but just that, that idea that like you don't have to practice these cycle syncing practices in order to have a healthy cycle, like, because I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure for it now.
Yeah, and it just it I feel like it yeah, it just causes stress and confusion, and in terms of thinking about how, Abby and I would work through this process with an actual client, we would start with the
Mhm.
foundations first and foremost, and make sure that all of those things are in place so we can get clarity around how the body feels when it is well supported, and that we're not missing one of those big fundamental rocks. And, as we progress in our work with clients, and, we as practitioners, we have a lot of clinical experience in terms of evaluating, clients' symptoms, and we're really familiar with kind of how different imbalances can appear in the form of symptoms, with women. But even in those cases too, we're doing testing. We're doing extensive hormone testing, and when we identify that there are specific imbalances that we can support using nutrition, lifestyle, um, and when we take a little bit more of a micro focus, it's after we've worked through the foundations. It's once we're super familiar with how the body is communicating with us, and when we also have lab data to support those shifts. And even in those cases, we are not recommending these like quick in the moment shifts with food. We're recommending, okay, let's prioritize, these foods consistently. Let's
Mhm.
build up those nutrient stores, support the detoxification, lower the inflammation, and let's monitor the cycle for the next few months, right? So it's a longer term process, and it's not to discredit that, making shifts with food and, exercise can't be valuable. But we just need to actually be realistic here about the things that we're implementing, the impact that, they might have, and just to make sure we're not overlooking the foundation.
Yeah. And I think too, there's just the one last point here of like on the long term is like when we make these changes, like the foundational changes, it's like we're really seeing those play out in the next like 3 to 4 months.
Mhm.
Like it's not, what I did. I mean, we can certainly see some micro like changes and shifts in hormones and things like that. But it's again that like longer experience of, hormones, thankfully, don't change overnight. We wouldn't want them to. That would be
Mhm.
very chaotic. Like, they're slow, they're very small, like in volume in the body, they're very small, but they're very powerful. So they gradually respond and change. And we're so thankful for some of those gradual changes. But that really is more, you know, evidence for the consistency of when we do make changes, making those foundations and then sticking to them consistently. And then from a place of strength, maybe moving to some of these more like nuanced conversations and a place of like
Yeah.
education around, why might I be doing them? What am I looking for with these changes? And certainly self evaluation of, is this change making me feel overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about greens powders.
Ooh, hot.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is a hot one.
So, of all the promises or the over promises, I would say on TikTok and Instagram, I think greens powders are like taking the cake. I mean, really, what I've been seeing is like the big call outs are they're saying we can, eliminate bloating, we can give you a flat belly, we can promote your weight loss, we can skyrocket your energy, and we can like unlock the secrets of life. Is essentially like everything that greens powders are really talking about. Now, when we actually zero in and think about like, okay, what's in a greens powders and what can they actually provide us with? I mean, greens powders are great sources of phytonutrients and polyphenols for antioxidant and anti-inflammatory functions. Like those are pretty powerful. Okay, we're not going to throw shade at that. Great source of minerals from those kind of plant ingredients for energy, hydration, and cellular health. They're food for the microbiome, so they're helping to increase that microbial diversity. And those are that's a short list of some really powerful functions that we can tout greens powders with. Um, but saying that they're immediately going to like heal your gut and eliminate your bloat, like no, that's not a promise that Jilly or I would stand behind. And certainly not what we would prescribe to a client who comes to us with bloating and weight loss goals. We wouldn't say, you know what you need a greens powder. That's not part of our conversation, and we'll get into that more in a second. Um, but what we wanted to kind of approach this conversation as, again, like not saying that we have no shade with greens powders. They can be a wonderful part of someone's kind of supplement support, because that's what they are. They're a supplement. So we need to look at them as a supplement, and we have to be meticulous about the quality of the greens powder that we are consuming, because greens powder are a concentrate, and whatever's in that plant, that selection of plants that company that we're entrusting to give us a really high quality product, we're going to get it. We're going to get the good, we're going to get the bad. So depending upon the quality and the care of the ingredients used, we're going to get more of the good or more of the bad, depending upon, again, the quality and the integrity of the company behind it. So really, we're actually looking at the company more than, and the product, obviously, that specifically. And when we think about plants, plants are amazing. They're nutrient dense, but they also are reservoirs for cleaning up the environment around them. So when we think of plants, they can kind of pull in like heavy metals as an example. Maybe we've heard about like arsenic in rice or apples or other plants. I know those were headlines like a couple years ago of like, there's arsenic in your vegetables or in your rice, and like everyone run for the hills. It's always been there. It's just an innate part of plants, just as those anti-nutrients that we talked about are innate parts of plants. But they're not things that we necessarily need to fear, but we do have to be aware, particularly when we're not eating these foods in their whole form. We're eating them in a boiled down, concentrated form. And that's when we do have to get micro in terms of, hey, we need some testing from a third party to really understand the quality of this product. So when we're concentrating those down, that's when we really need to understand, this third party. So these are where on websites of whatever product you're looking at. So if you fall victim to any of those Blooms powders that are, literally everywhere on social media, go to their website and look for their third party testing. I will tell you it's not there, because I tried to find it. And we really want to be looking for, the testing around pesticides, the testing around heavy metals like lead, arsenic, mercury, cadmium. We want to be looking for microbial contamination. Those are all things that are measured by third party companies that a supplement company that has integrity will openly post on their website. I think a really big thing with green powders too, that I feel, and I think Jilly aligns very personally, is that they need to be organic. Because again, we're taking a large kind of amount of fruits or vegetables. Greens powders are mostly vegetables, and we're concentrating it down. Now, if we have those, and we're paying a top dollar for a lot of these powders, and I think what we want to be aiming for is don't give us the things that we don't want. Don't concentrate me down a bunch of pesticides and then have me take it as a supplement and think it's doing something good for me. Like that's, at the very top of the list, it better be organic, and everything in there we really want to see organic. So that's really protecting ourselves against over a high dose of pesticides and herbicides coming in with those plants, particularly again, if we're not eating them in their whole form and we're taking a supplement, we want to see it organic. And then we also don't want to see any fillers. So when you read the ingredients list and always we want to be reading the ingredients list of these greens powders, we must be able to identify what these are. They should be whole foods that are going into this product, not chemical, products that we couldn't even draw a picture of or even sound them out, if we tried. So like on the Bloom's powders, I'm like picking on the Bloom's powders, but that's fine. It's got maltodextrin in it. And, this is kind of a filler ingredient that works to make everything kind of stay in the powdered form and works as like a preservative and kind of is not really in there out of necessity. And so we want to just kind of be aware of, what are these things going into these products, and are they in fact things that we want to be taking in concentrated doses every day or sometimes 2 times a day, depending upon, what these companies are telling us to do. So in terms of like brands that, we trust, we want to kind of leave you with, and that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of looking at all of these brands online to be like, who is sharing their COA? So that's the document that really gives this third party testing. It gives the exact values of, how much lead, arsenic, pesticides, like, what's being tested and what's actually coming out in this product. The only one that I could find, and I looked at a bunch of big brands, ones that get a lot of Instagram love out there, the only one that I could find was Organifi. And that one is really the only one that Jillian and I recommend to clients. So it's a very trusted company. And right on their website, they have, the COA for all of their products. And you can pull it up and you can read it. And you don't have to email them to ask them. You don't have to go above and beyond. They have integrity, and they want you to see the additional money that they pay to get these third-party testing, because they know that their products are, can uphold the, agreements that they're going into you as a consumer-driven product. So they do have traditional greens powders. We also don't see any additional vitamins or minerals in them most of the time. In a lot of these greens powders that have additional like B vitamins or vitamin D or vitamin C, like they're really crappy quality. Jillian and I see this across the board, that they're just like poor quality B vitamins that actually have more inflammatory interactions in the body than they do actual B vitamin support, because there's different types of forms of nutrients, and the better quality nutrient, the higher cost it is. And a lot of these companies are just trying to make money. So we have to be mindful of, what are supplements that we're taking. And we're big proponents of, if you don't know the, ins and outs of the supplements you're taking, and you're buying them from maybe not trusted companies that don't have like deep integrity, like we'd rather you not take them. And we'd rather you just use whole foods. We feel that passionate about that. So, our goal with this is really just to kind of share about like some of the red flags that we see with these kind of greens powders being touted to solve all of these things, really identifying that, hey, they're not really solving the things that they say they are. They can have some benefits, but we also want to know that there are some drawbacks, but we need to know the quality of that we're getting from them. And Jillian and I were kind of talking before this too, and saying, and you know what, like the reality is like, we never recommend greens powders. Like, what we recommend? We recommend Reds powders, quite frankly, to really throw this conversation for a loop. Like when we get back a comprehensive stool test from clients, either gut health clients or, Jillian's hormones clients that maybe have some gut dynamics or some of their hormone challenges coming from their gut. And we see low beneficial bacteria, especially our like short chain fatty acid producers, those major anti-inflammatories that we love and communicators. the biggest food sources for them are red fruits and vegetables. They are so rich in key polyphenols and kind of plant nutrients that are feeding and loving up on those really wonderful keystone species in the gut that have so much to do with the health of the microbiome. So, when we really think about like using these very targeted tools to support someone's health, like greens powders are not in that list. They can be great, but like Reds powders, and Organifi's got a great Reds powders. This is not an ad for Organifi, but I just like we'll call it out and give you the tools that we use, and it's delicious. It tastes like fruit juice. I was actually pushing it on my trainer the other day. So like Dave, if you're listening.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I absolutely could not tell you the last time I recommended a greens powder as part of a client supplement protocol. And, if they make you feel good, it's within your budget, it's a great quality product, awesome. But I think my biggest issue, or one of my biggest issues with these things, is that it makes people feel like, all of these ads for the, greens powders and the claims that they're making, it makes people feel like, one, they need to buy into these like really expensive powders and potions in order to heal their health, which is absolutely not true. And two, it serves as a distraction, right? So we're like, oh my gosh, I have the gut issues, the hormone issues, this and that. Oh, and there's this greens powder that, is going to solve everything. I would much, much rather see a client put that money towards a monthly meditation app, or breathwork app, and to, put that money into, buying a bunch of, fresher frozen fruits and veggies and like nourishing their gut with the actual whole food and all the fibrous matter and the polyphenols and all of these wonderful compounds. And so it's just, I want to highlight the fact that, if you're in a position of feeling like, man, health is so expensive, it can be. And, if that's what you're into and you have a budget for it, great. That's fine. Again, we want you to do your thing, focus on quality, which Abby kind of gave you some really great information about. But if that's not, in the cards for you, that's okay. And you can still very, very effectively heal your gut and hormones without the fancy potions and powders.
Well said.
So last up here, we are diving into the fat loss supplement or supplements that are apparently like storming the market right now, which are apple cider vinegar gummies for fat loss. My mom actually, I cannot believe we're talking about this. My mom actually put this on my radar, and then, it like snowballed. And now I've seen that there's like, dozens of different apple cider vinegar fat loss gummies out there on the market. The ads are insane, by the way. I hope that none of you listening have had to kind of, witness these, but I'm sure that you have, because they seem to be everywhere. But we're gonna dive in and talk a little bit about, why this is just ridiculous, honestly, at the end of the day. So where do we even begin? Apple cider vinegar, or I'm going to refer to it as ACV for short, so I don't have to keep saying that throughout this whole little segment. So ACV vinegar gummies are being promoted as this like magical fat loss, fat burning supplement. So before we dive into talking about like the gummies and the actual products that we're seeing on the market themselves, let's just briefly chat about apple cider vinegar, or ACV itself, and talk a little bit about what we actually know it can and cannot do. So apple cider vinegar, for anyone that is not familiar with it, is a type of vinegar that is made through the fermentation of pressed apples. So basically, whole apples are pressed with the skin on, and the natural bacteria and sugar in the crushed apples ferment and turn into ethanol or alcohol. There's then a second fermentation process that the apples go through, where the alcohol is then converted into something called acetic acid. Acetic acid in ACV is the primary compound that research suggests may have some really cool potential health benefits. There isn't a ton of data on apple cider vinegar or tons of like, large, really high quality studies, but there is some really great small animal studies and some small human studies that suggest that consuming ACV may positively impact blood sugar parameters. That's kind of the majority of the data that we do have on ACV is around blood sugar and blood sugar parameters. So, specifically, there might be benefits to consuming apple cider vinegar before eating a carbohydrate rich meal to decrease post meal blood sugar and insulin spikes. If you're new here and you're not sure, why that's an important thing, if you go back to our first season, episode 2, I believe, one of the first few episodes, we do a deep dive here in case you want a refresher on blood sugar. So that's where the big impact seems to be, though, with this post-meal blood sugar and minimizing some of those blood sugar and insulin spikes. One small study that I thought was really interesting had participants that had normal insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance, or type 2 diabetes. So it had all of these different groups consume a beverage containing either 4 teaspoons of ACV or a placebo 2 minutes before eating a buttered bagel with orange juice. So high simple carb meal. In the hour after eating the meal, the ACV drinkers saw anywhere from a 19 to 34% improvement in insulin sensitivity and reduced post-meal blood sugar and insulin levels, with the most significant effect being found in the insulin-resistant group. So people who were already having, some issues with blood sugar and, their cells responding to that insulin. Another really cool study done in healthy individuals had one group of people eat a salad dressed with olive oil, followed by 50 grams of carbohydrates from white bread. And another group ate a salad dressed with vinegar, followed by the same portion of carbohydrates from white bread. And this study found that the group that ate the salad dressed with vinegar before the bread had blood sugar spikes that were about 30% smaller on average than the olive oil group, which is pretty freaking profound. Like, that's a big difference with just, olive oil versus vinegar. And really the acetic acid in the ACV that I mentioned appears to be what is improving blood sugar and insulin in a few different ways. So predominantly by delaying gastric emptying, so slowing down the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream, and also by increasing the uptake of glucose into our cells. So basically like supporting a few pieces of the process where, we're absorbing the glucose more slowly, and then our cells are going to respond a little bit, more easily to the insulin and glucose and kind of bring that into the cells. Abby and I have talked a lot about the importance of blood sugar here, like I mentioned, and probably a little bit too much in all honesty. But it's really that important. And it's so foundational for digestion, your gut, your hormones, your metabolism. So it's just it's an interesting tool to consider in terms of apple cider vinegar itself.
It's really fascinating. I mean, that is like 30% on average for both of those studies is really significant. And it's funny that I can see where, the research, and then it's like, oh my God, so these gummies, like what you're telling us that these gummies have it? Like I'm going to eat these. That's the exact same thing, right? And the translation from apple cider vinegar, because if anyone's taken a drink with apple cider vinegar in it, even these like 4 teaspoons at the study, like it's not that fun. I'm just, I will do it. It's really nice for digestion. And, certainly if I'm, maybe going to go out to eat or know that I'm going to have some like higher carbohydrate, or maybe even like alcohol, something like that. But you're like, ooh, that was intense. So I understand the allure of like, ooh, it can be dressed in a gummy now, but it doesn't translate. And Jill is gonna give us the proof in the pudding.
It does not translate. And before we dive into the specifics with gummies, a couple other things that I did want to highlight that were pretty cool in some very small studies with apple cider vinegar, the vinegar form itself. Outside of, improving blood sugar and insulin levels was some studies have found that the apple cider vinegar actually promotes satiety. So it helps with, feelings of fullness after meals, and possibly by activating an enzyme called AMPK. that is involved with fat oxidation, which we talked about in, our navigating weight episode. But it can actually help with stimulating that enzyme, which is involved in fat, oxidation. And the studies are very small in those, kind of areas that I just described, but it's pretty cool. And apple cider vinegar is, even though it doesn't taste amazing, it can be an easy tool to integrate. And it seems as though there are, a variety of potential benefits, but predominantly in the blood sugar arena. Gummies, apple cider vinegar gummies. So research on apple cider vinegar gummies for weight loss and for anything is very, very limited and inconclusive. We have really one study that I could find that was actually done on, an apple cider vinegar supplement versus actual liquid vinegar itself. Outside of that, I couldn't find much. If there's something I'm missing, feel free to let us know here. But really, we're just not seeing data on the supplements themselves. The one study that I did find that was published in 2020 found that commercial vinegar supplements did not have the same physiological benefits for managing post-meal blood sugar levels when compared to liquid vinegar. So they did, I think it was like a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar before meals, and then the same amount of that acetic acid, but in like tablet or supplement form. And the researchers who conducted this study proposed that apple cider vinegar supplements may not have had the same benefits because of the dissolution rate of the supplements, meaning that the liquid vinegar is absorbed super rapidly into the body and quickly, right? So you get this big kind of liquid punch of the ACV, and we're getting all the stimulation of enzymes, digestive secretions. So in, tablet, gummy, supplement form, the dissolution rate is going to likely be much slower. So that might be part of why, we didn't see that positive benefit, on blood sugar after eating. The other theory here is that the stability of the acetic acid might be impacted when the liquid ACV is turned into a supplement. So again, acetic acid being that potential beneficial compound in ACV. So at the end of the day, we really have no clue if these ACV supplements, gummies, tablets, whatever it is, are having any benefit at all. It doesn't appear that they are, and it's which is just so interesting because they're everywhere. Like when I was looking on Amazon, they even have them all over Whole Foods, which is wild. But anyway, they're everywhere, and there's so much marketing around them and so much like touting of all the benefits and the fat burning and the this and the that. But we really actually have no data to support, ACV in supplement form. The other thing that I noticed in kind of researching these different products is that most of these popular supplements don't even list the amount of apple cider vinegar it contains, the proportion of acetic acid in it. So we have no clue what's going on in there. And many of the supplements, similar to what Abby mentioned about the greens powders, that we looked at, also included a lot of cheap additives, fillers, crappy forms of B vitamins, added excess sugars, which, all right, aren't we looking to balance blood sugar here? Why are we like putting a bunch of syrups and things like that into the supplement? So to kind of sum it up, I think you can conclude that we do not recommend ACV gummies as a supplement. And the claims about these gummies being magical for fat loss is unfortunately fake news. So we don't want you to waste your money on these, which is why we're talking about this. But it is possible that liquid apple cider vinegar with meals could be a helpful tool for balancing blood sugar, which might support shifts with metabolic health and weight and other positive things in the body over time. However, this is where we need to hop on the soapbox and, remind everyone that no supplement alone no liquid apple cider vinegar, no amount of that is going to transform your health by itself. The key for fat loss or healing your gut or healing your hormones is going to involve building that super supportive foundation with your nutrition and lifestyle, and focusing on consistency with all of the super unsexy things that we cover in this podcast, weekly. And tools like apple cider vinegar with meals or utilizing high quality supplements to support your specific needs or dynamics that need, rebalancing can be helpful. But if you're not working on the foundation and you're just trying to seek out a quick fix with a supplement or an apple cider vinegar gummy, we are likely missing the forest for the trees.
Moral of the story, like, let's not miss the forest for the trees. But I think what you brought such great attention to is, what about if we build apple cider vinegar like in as the salad dressing to our salad that's a part of our meal? You could use it as, like, again, a tool, taking like a tablespoon, max two, dilute it in a little bit of water as like a little, apple cider vinegar shot, or mix it into like a bigger glass of water if you like the flavor of it. Like, these can be great tools, but again,
100%.
standalone, they're not going to like revolutionize your health if we're not doing the big rock foundations. But from a digestive standpoint, that bitter, that extreme, like, that feeling when you drink the apple cider vinegar or you eat the salad, those are activating our bitter compounds and actually supporting the secretion of digestive enzymes and the kind of activation of digestion. We've talked a lot about bitter foods in our functional food episode. So, it's a wonderful food to include. We don't have to drink it if we don't want to drink it, but you can use it as, pantry staple for multitudes of things. It makes a great, like, kind of that like bitter acid constituent to balancing a meal. I mean, that's like what a lot of chefs talk about, like acid, fat. What are those other like
Salt?
qualities?
Salt?
Like salt.
I don't know. Okay.
There's like four that it's like
Yeah.
acid, salt, fat, and there's another one. There's
Something
like a book
else.
title about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that's where, it's like, ooh, and that's like super satisfying, not only from the research that we can see of satisfying, but it also is like hitting our taste and our joy and all of those pieces. So I think thinking about it as like a functional food itself. I actually think we had initially said that we were going to talk about apple cider vinegar in that episode.
Then we
But I don't think
ran way over, and we were like, we got to cut one out.
apple cider vinegar, you got the pull. So we're giving it a shout out here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think, well, we're definitely not recommending the gummies, but overall, I want to reiterate that we don't want to discourage you from like using different tools, but we want to encourage you to think about the overall context of what's going on with your diet, lifestyle, your health. And we just want to make sure that you're putting energy into things that are going to move the needle with your health. And liquid apple cider vinegar, great example of something that can be supportive, especially seemingly before, higher carbohydrate meals. But that alone is not going to, re-regulate blood sugar. But it can be a piece of the puzzle, if it's something that's easy to integrate for you.
Educated consumers. That's what we ourselves are trying to be, and what we want to, educate you all to be. And so that we can know, when something's worth it, because our dollars that we want to spend on the most effective pieces for our health. And let's put that more towards those foundations, and then, picking and choosing those like shiny objects. Because please, Jillian and we got a lot of shiny objects in our lives. We find them very fun, but really
we love
high
them.
quality.
We like to be guinea pigs for our clients and be able to make sure we can wholeheartedly recommend each product and tool that we're recommending. So overarching theme of today, don't get too zoomed in, don't miss the forest for the trees. And we hope this was helpful in terms of, kind of debunking, some of these things that we're seeing on social media. And if you are seeing anything else out there, TikTok trends, Instagram trends in terms of things that are being promoted and they have all these health benefits attached to it, send it our way. And, you can send it to the Your Body Has Your Back Instagram. We will collect these and dive in and do another one of these. down the line.